Hey everyone, Saul from 3 Games here, coming to you today with the Magic Ban and Restrict List update that came out on August 26th, which was yesterday. Now this was an emergency ban, because normally ban and restrict list updates only happen when standard sets are released, which would have been Throne of Eldraine is the next one, which is the first week of October. So that, roughly a month and a half away. Now, Wizards felt that there was things they needed to address, so they did so. Now, this has both implications for standard, modern, and vintage. I'm only going to go more in depth on the standard and modern stuff in this video because I don't understand vintage well enough. I don't play or follow vintage well enough to be able to make an adequate analysis of vintage. So the update to the ban and restrict list is for standard, they unbanned Rampaging Frosted. For modern, they banned Hogak, Arisen Necropolis, and Faithless Looting, and they unbanned Stoneforge Mystic. For vintage, Karn the Great Creator, Mystic Forge, Mental Misstep, and Golgari Grave Troll all got restricted, and Fastbond got unrestricted. So these will go into effect in paper on August 30th. Online, they've already gone into effect, and in Arena, they'll go into effect on September 4th. Now, the reason they banned Rampaging Frosted originally was it was during the era of Big Red or Hazard Red. It was a very oppressive time to play anything other than red. You pretty much had to play red, or you had to play a very, very hard control deck that could stop it. And so it was too oppressive for its time. Now they're saying pretty much with the rise of Orzhov Vampires and the two different variant Scapeshift decks, they think it's a good time to unban Rampaging Frosted because of its impact on preventing people from gaining life, which both Orzhov Vampires and Dread Presence Scapeshift does, as well as it will make an impact on anything that is token heavy because of its nature of whenever a token enters the battlefield, it will deal damage. Now, originally when this was designed by R&D, it was thought to be an amazing sideboard card, and that's the only place it would see play, but it saw main deck play, and I'm going to get into a little bit more in depth about that in a second, but I want to kind of go over the notes of the ban and restrict list update. So next up we have in modern, Hogak, Arisen Necropolis. So it's been dominating modern for months. It's been only been out for about 2 months, but since it came out, and since people figured out to jam it in their Dredgevine decks or Bridgevine or whatever you want to call it, dredge decks, it's gone, to the point where the win rate is super high. 40 to 50% of showings at major tournaments have been this deck. So this is something that needs to be addressed because it's starting to warp the format, is what Wizards is saying. Back on July 8th, they banned Bridge from Below, hoping that this would weaken the deck. So less than a month after the deck came out, they had to ban something to try to weaken it. It unfortunately did not, and they realized the crux of the issue was the actual, card Hogak. So they're going to be, they want to ban it because it's starting to warp the format in such a way that you're seeing Surgical Extraction, Leyline of the Void, and Rest in Peace all played mainboard. And generally speaking, these are supposed to be solid sideboard cards that really don't see a purpose in mainboard play. Now, they were seeing mainboard play before this already due to Arclight Phoenix decks, but they're going to address that by the ban that they just did on Faithless Looting, because they feel that Faithless Looting enables a lot of graveyard decks. And in the past year, the number of top tier decks that run Faithless Looting kind of shows that something needed to be addressed with it. Because you had Hollow One, you have Izzet and Mono Red Phoenix, as well as Dredge and Bridgevine, all that ran it, plus other decks were running it. I know some of the Mono Red decks were starting to run it. It's just too efficient for what it does, is what Wizards is saying. So it needed to be addressed. Now, at this time, they figured with them shaking up the meta this hard, they figured it would be a good time to unban Stoneforge Mystic. Because Stoneforge Mystic would force people to move away from the graveyard-centric decks they've been playing and move it more towards something to the effect of a more battlefield and hand-driven strategy, which I think makes sense given that it's a body that when it gets out you have to deal with, or it's going to pull out major equipment and it's going to get ugly very, very quickly. Now, that being said, Modern has tons of removal, so I don't think this is going to really make the biggest impact on Modern. But now, back to more of my opinion on these. So we got through the clinical part, and now we're to the me ranting for a second, because Rampaging Frosted on getting unbanned makes sense. Now, I want to say R&D, for them to think that this would only have seen sideboard play is ridiculous. It's a 3-mana, 3/3 with Menace, stops my opponents from gaining life, and whenever a creature enters the battlefield under any player's control, they lose life. Generally speaking, mono red decks don't run that many creatures, and stopping your opponents from gaining life is huge, given that that's one of the few ways you have to really stop mono red, is by essentially gaining life enough that they run out of gas, and then you can overwhelm them again. So the fact that Wizards ever thought that this would just be a sideboard card is a little ridiculous to me, and it was starting to see main board play 4-ofs in most red decks, and it makes sense. Now, them saying, oh, we're just going to unban it to help with this standard format we're currently in, I think as well that is a little ridiculous, because standard is going to rotate in October when Throne of Eldraine drops, first week of October. So the 2 decks we're talking about that it's an answer to, Orzhov Vampires and Scapeshift, are going to rotate anyways. They're going to lose most of their deck in both those cases. So I don't see how this makes that big of a difference. All it's going to impact is a few Magic Fests that are coming up, as well as maybe there's a major tournament along the way. But it's a month. People could have waited, and so you're unbanning a card that's anyways going to rotate in a month. I think mostly what this is Wizards' way of kind of acknowledging the fact we probably should have unbanned this a while ago and just forgot to, or haven't gone into it. Because after last rotation, Red took enough of a beating that this probably could have come out, and it wouldn't have made Red the most oppressive thing out there. But, maybe I'm wrong. But honestly, I think this could have been unbanned a while ago to let people play with cards. Now, next up, we have Hogak. So they banned Bridge from Below, and I understand why they banned Bridge from Below, because it does enable a lot of really quasi-degenerate strategies. But really what they wanted to do was figure out a way to stop Hogak without banning Hogak, because they just released it in a brand new product. This is a product that's just about 2 months old, and they've already had to ban one of the big cards from it. And that kind of just shows you how playtest fell, because they've said on several occasions that playtest doesn't take eternal formats into consideration when they do their playtesting or when they do their set design. But they designed a product for Modern. You need to take Modern into consideration, because honestly, to a degree, Modern Horizons does feel like they didn't actually look at Modern as a whole and the way this could impact Modern as a whole. Now, Modern Horizons is still a great product, this one card aside, but frankly, they should have just outright banned this back in July when they banned when they banned Bridge from Below, because Hogak is just such a crazy enabler with its, convoking and delving itself out, and just bringing it out as quickly as you can is ridiculous. And them saying, oh, the crux of the problem, of course the crux of the problem in all these decks that suddenly started to top tier when Hogak came out is Hogak. Now, Modern for a while, though, has been going to these crazy graveyard-centric decks for at least a year plus now, since Hollow One and other things have come out. So it makes sense that they are addressing Faithless Looting, because Faithless Looting is a 1-mana draw 2, discard 2. It's a huge enabler, and it has flashback. Now, I'm sure some of these decks are going to try to use Burning Inquiry and stuff like that, but Burning Inquiry is just going now into the RNG field at that point to try to enable your huge discard deck. It is 1 mana, though, so it's possible that they'll try to do it. But overall, Faithless Looting, there's a bunch of people that have been calling for this ban for a while, because if Wizards really want to get away from graveyard-centric strategies, like they said, then this is the most logical ban. Unfortunately, it is the only really efficient card draw / hand filter Red has currently. Yes, I know Cathartic Reunion and Tormenting Voices are in format, but they're 2 mana, which right away makes it 1 mana too slow for what it's trying to be. So essentially, you're now going to be relying on your Serum Vision ops, and it's going to go back to, Thought Scour, probably trying to hope to bin stuff, which is not efficient enough for the decks in question. So maybe that means one of my favorite decks, which is 8-Rack, will actually see some kind of play again, because right now 8-Rack pretty much is sitting sub tier 3, because with how many graveyard-centric decks are out there, I would go turn 1, discard something, and my opponent would thank me, which is right away in the feel-bads. Now, some people online are freaking out about the Stoneforge Mystic unbanning. I think at this point that is actually a very smart move by Wizards, because it enables, like they want to do, the battlefield and hand-driven decks. Now, that being said, there still is so much removal, and hopefully we will see these graveyard mainboarding that has been happening decrease heavily, because right now Modern is feeling almost more like Legacy in the way it combos off and lack of interaction, and when it finally does go off, you can't really stop it unless you're running the ley lines and surgicals and things like that. And you're seeing people even surgical mainboard in response to other people's surgicals, so they can stop you from stripping their combo pieces out of their graveyard. That's insane to me, that we are now playing counterplay with other graveyard hate to self-graveyard hate, essentially, to stop someone from stripping my graveyard and my deck of my combo pieces. This is where we're getting into this insane level where Modern's at. And then, to add to it, you have to run Leyline of the Void mainboard, which pretty much, if you don't get it on turn 0 against decks like Hogak and other graveyard decks, didn't work. When Rest in Peace was too slow at 2 mana, this is where I think Hogak should have been addressed months ago. And with them hitting Faithless Looting, it does make sense, because it's going to stop all this graveyard shenanigans, and it will shift Modern probably back towards a more battlefield and hand-driven game, which is what Magic is supposed to be. This era of using graveyards as hand extensions in Modern is ridiculous to me. I thought it was cool when it first started, but in the last year, it's essentially shifted everything to having to focus so heavily on it that you either have to hate it or you have to join in, that seeing Stoneforge Mystic and get unbanned, and maybe we'll see some other battlefield strategies, but I don't think Stoneforge Mystic is going to make the biggest impact, because you play it on one turn, you get your 2 equipments, and you have to hope it's still there the next turn to use it, unless you have a way to give it haste, which you never know. People have ways to give it haste easily enough. But we have Assassin's Trophy, Abrupt Decay, Fatal Push. I can go down the list of just things Jund will have in their deck potentially, between Lightning Bolts and other things. And yes, I know Giver of Runes is out there, but if I let your Giver of Runes stay around for more than a turn, I'm probably going to be in trouble anyways. Because, yeah, Giver of Runes instantly is a target for all removal, which subsequently Stoneforge Mystic falls into the same category. And there's just so much removal, board wipes, other things that kind of just get around Giver of Runes and Stoneforge Mystic, that at this point I am not super worried about it coming out and warping the format. Because look at Jace the Mind Sculptor. It came out, it really didn't make a huge impact. Same with Bloodbraid Elf. Oh, they're the boogeyman that everyone was afraid of. And it really didn't warp Modern to the degree I thought it was going to. So subsequently, I think both of these kind of make sense in the grand scheme of things. So there you have it. That is the update for the Ban and Restrict list that was just done on August the 6th, and my thoughts on it. Tell me what you think below in the comments. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Do you think these are good bans? Do you think Wizards are on the right path? If you play Vintage and you can enlighten us a little bit, feel free to comment below, because I couldn't do justice to what the Ban and Restrict list update for Vintage was, given that I don't really follow Vintage. Now, You can follow us on all major social media. That's in the description box below. As well as you can follow what's going on in store at on our website, threekingdomsgames.com. As well as you can always stop into store to see what's going on. There's one in Markham, one in Toronto. I'll see you next time.